F. William Engdahl. What's up, Jose? No way, Jose. What's up?
Howdy, Jay. Since you brought up Ostrovsky's book, and you mentioned how you don't expect anyone in the audience to buy and read it. I just wanted to just quickly, as a comment on that, bring up that America is far from literate and it's much more worse. It's much worse than people realize. So when you see the literacy rates that the public school system or the educational department will brag about, 98% literacy. What they mean is literacy level 1, which is the ability to sound out letters and words on a page. It's not actually to be able to even understand what's being communicated by the words on the page. So when you look at the functional literacy level is literacy level 3.
Yeah.
So that's for example, if you go to a swimming pool and you have a list of 10 rules for the pool, you need to have a literacy level 3 is the ability to understand what those instructions on the on that sign are. And only 1 in 2 Americans actually are literacy level 3 or higher.
Wow.
So 1 out of 2 Americans cannot understand the instructions on, that are listed next to a pool, a public pool or in a public park.
Wow.
It's horrific. And I have friends,
By the way, are you the guy that's on Coattail streams?
Yes.
Yeah. By the way, you're a really intelligent guy, man. I actually, when I listen, I really learn from you, and that's saying a lot because there's not a lot of live streamers and people who go on streams that I don't mean this in an arrogant way, just I don't learn a lot from people, but I learn from you.
Thank you. And part of that is, and unfortunately, it's because of the general literacy. So, for example, you mentioned Ostrovsky's book. So, to read a book like Ostrovsky, a nonfiction work like that, or to read a novel like Charles Dickens, you need to have a literacy level 4. And only 12% of Americans have literacy level 4 or above.
Whoa.
And that's something I've considered too, because I'm there is actually a novel idea I've been working on. And one thing I've realized is at most only 1 in 8 Americans today in the population are actually sufficiently literate to be able to read it.
Wow.
So even your Hollywood books that you wrote, my wife loved both of them that she's read so far. And I don't know if the third one's already been released, but if it's released or when it's going to be released, I'll be getting it.
It'll be out in July.
Awesome. I'll be able to get it for her birthday. So she's not listening right now, so she doesn't know I'm getting it for her birthday. But yeah, the only 1 in 12 Americans are able to read that, or 1 in 8 Americans are able to read that book. And it relates to something, I was here listening to Elder Justin Parvu, something he said back in 2009, where he said that one of the great sins of this modern day is ignorance, and that unfortunately many people revel in that ignorance. And that's why, a lot of them, if we were to go back, 100 years ago, 150 years ago in the United States, or even the Spanish Americas, there would be a lot more people who would be, way more people would be well read, like you are, or like I are. You look, I've read the letters of Welsh coal miners from the 1910s, during World War I. And your average coal miner in Wales, who didn't even have a high school education, was far better read than your average college graduate today. And that's why there is such a level of ignorance. And that's why, as you mentioned, since you're doing these live streams and you're getting, exposure to, we'll just say the whole span of America, most Americans don't have the capacity. Unfortunately, they were never given the tools in their basic education to be able to, even just read the text, let alone, being able to hold an idea in their head that they don't necessarily agree with and analyze it.
Right. By the way, I think it was one of Coattail streams a couple of years ago, and he was actually talking about literacy stats in America, and it was it even blew me away. It was something like 60% of kids that graduate can't read.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
Or maybe it was 70%, 67% have never read a book. Maybe it's something like that.
Mm-hmm. No, it's horrific. It's really bad. And I know so my youngest sister-in-laws, they're, Gen Z. It's 1 in 12 who actually read books. It's 1 in 8 who can, 1 in 12 who actually do. And that's the scary part too of, I know I was looking at, this was years ago, but I was looking at Barna studies in terms of Bible reading among Christians in the United States. And they were despairing over how only 6% of Protestants actually read the Bible. But then again, only 12% of the population are actually able or sufficiently literate to be able to read the Bible.
Oh, yeah. So even the Protestants reading the Bible can't understand it.
Correct. And that's part of the huge problem. And that's why, there are a lot of books, I read a lot. But I really do appreciate, even though I've not used the podcast, for the book series that you've done and the breakdowns you've done audibly. But there are a lot of people that I've recommended those breakdowns you do of like the geopolitics books, because most people I know, they can't actually read. Even a more beginner friend, I would say like a more normie friend, or not normie friendly, but you know normal IQ friendly text like James Perloff.
Yeah.
Forget about Carol Quigley. They're not going to be able to go through that. The capacity's just not there.
Right.
So I am very grateful for the work that you've done in terms of breaking down those books, because I've been able to recommend your stuff for people who don't have the literate capacity. And it also shows the importance of why, like, I know some people say, like, they went through the public school system and they were fine. Like, I went through both private and public schools, but the reason I can read and the reason why I read the way I do is because it was my father who taught me during the summers when I was off.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned far more from my father. Like, I'll put it this, like, I learned more from my father in 1 hour, like during a vacation day, than I would learn in like 1 week of school. And that's why one thing for people, even for those who, like you say, you generally cannot homeschool your kids, I do recommend, especially if you're the dad, like seriously, you can just spending 1 hour with your kids, teaching them, they will learn so much more from you than what they're learning in the school system.
Yeah, and for those that are interested in a lot of people are asking about where they can see your talks and your input. Usually when David Patrick Harry, Church of the Eternal Logos, has an open panel, usually Jose calls in and gives his input. So you guys can go check out the open panels over on Church of the Eternal Logos channel to hear more of his input. Anything else you want to leave us with? Appreciate that.
No, that's it. And just that's why, it's like, what do you call it? Learning to be patient with people and understanding. I know it's tough because I've had the same frustrations myself. It's, with people in real life. It's just, always keep in the back of I always try to keep in the back of my mind, statistically speaking, the person that I'm talking to, odds are they actually cannot read a book. And that, like, for me, it would just horrify me to be in that kind of position where if I didn't have the tools, to even read. That is something that would just frighten me. In fact, that's most adults today.
Right.
It just shows how much the empire has decayed. And that's why, like, when I look at the operation of the Anglo-American Empire, when I look at its history and how it's run, it's amazing to me how they've intentionally dumbed down their own population to maintain their power over the system without taking into account that there are other power bases in the world who can compete with them, who are not dumbing down their population.
Yeah, and to be clear, people need to understand that if you go back and read Messianic Character of American Education by Rush Shuni, he actually details the early ideology that drove John Dewey and Horace Mann to help create public education, whereby they said they would dumb down and socialize man to make man a socialized creature rather than an individual who would think critically using reading, writing, and arithmetic. So they actually wanted to get rid of logic, get rid of the objective educational disciplines, literally to, quote, socialize man. And that was adopted explicitly. It took a long time for them to get that all the way through, but by the time of the 70s, where Charlotte Iserbyt wrote her book, Dumbing Down of American Education, she details the actual advance in that under Reagan, believe it or not. And then that gets us to where we are today, to where you've got, Common Core Obama education, which is all about the same type of dumbing down. And for those that are not aware of what he was talking about, if you go to my channel, if you go all the way down to the main page, there's a whole section, sorted out playlist of the global elite texts. And we go through here Jacques Attali. Here is CIA Manual on Anthropology book that we covered. Here's Door's Perception by Huxley. Here's Manly P. Hall book. Here is Psychonaut Terence McKenna. Here we cover Julian Huxley, UNESCO philosophy. Here we cover Friedhof Kopper's book Turning Point. Here's Anglo-American Establishment by Quigley. Here is History of Sexpionage book. Here is Brave New World. Here is Gladio text. Here is Johan Ratio's book. More Quigley, more Ratio. Cyber Polygon, Klaus's book, Timothy Leary book, more Terence McKenna, H.G. Wells's book, God, the Invisible King, Brzezinski's books here Here is Miles Copeland's Game of Nations CA book that we referenced earlier today. Here is Charles Galton Darwin's book. I just went blank on the title of that one, but there's that. Bertrand Russell, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, Edward Bernays, right here. We get into the Frankfurt School, Habermas, here. Here is Marilyn Ferguson's book, Aquarian Conspiracy, which is not a conspiracy book. It's actually a pro-New World Order book. Here is Jacques Attali's book that we covered 7 years ago. Here's Pentagon's Brain by Annie Jacobson. Here is H.G. Wells' New World Order book. Here's a couple books on MKUltra. Those are critical books. Here's Devil's Game that you heard me reference earlier today about U.S. support for radical Islam. And then here's me and Tristana. Here's this book. This video covers Alex Abea's book on the Rand Corporation.
Yeah,
anything else you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I got to get going soon because I have to take my son to the park, which I promised him I'd do. But one thing I want to mention, like for those who are on the literate scale but have not dived deep into the nonfiction, or you're not used to reading more complicated works, I do recommend, one of the purposes of fiction is to get, well, there are many purposes of fiction, but a good place to start also is even C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy.
Yeah.
Because Lewis goes very much, he gives you a snapshot of how the Anglo-American establishment actually functions, how they recruit people.
Yeah.
And it gives you a grounding. So when you approach these nonfiction works, whether you're going to be listening to them on Jay's podcast or you're someone who is more literate and wants to do the reading, it'll give you some grounding so things make sense and it's not just all, disjointed. So that would be my final recommendation. But thank you for all you do, Jay. I greatly appreciate it. And great. I'm glad you're working with Sam Hyde and getting some comedic work that you enjoy.
Thanks, man.
I know you enjoy that a bit more. So
appreciate that.
And I pray that you have plenty of success with that.
Well, you too, Jose. I appreciate your comments. And everybody should go check out his inputs with Church of the Eternal Logos when they do their open panels. Jose is usually there giving a pretty hefty bit of deep dive information. Now,